Trey'Dez Green leaving the LSU basketball team. Is it the right decision? You know, I got thoughts. Let's talk about it. Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. A busy night, Tuesday. Tiger baseball team will play a matinee against Southern, and the basketball team will play a game that, let's be honest, is its last opportunity to get a win this year against South Carolina. We'll give you some previews and what to watch coming up in just a smidge. But Matt McMahon met with reporters on Monday in advance of the South Carolina game and shared a little news about a two-sport athlete, which, boy, is he getting a lot of attention in football, whose basketball exploits might be over. So you all know Trey'Dez Green. Trey'Dez was a five-star tight end in the class of 2024, exploded onto the scene for the Tigers in football, caught 13 passes for 101 yards, 4 touchdowns, including 2 touchdowns in the bowl game against Baylor. And man, it is hard not to be intoxicated by Trey'Dez Green's talent on the football field. But Trey'Dez Green, when the football season ended, joined the basketball team, played in 6 games, although we didn't see him in the game against Oklahoma this past weekend. Well, on Monday, when Matt McMahon met with reporters, he disclosed that Trey'Dez Green is stepping away from the basketball team. They do expect him to return at some point, according to Matt McMahon. But here's sort of an explanation of why Green is stepping away from the basketball team at this point.
I can't imagine the time demand, from the football off-season training program. The thing have been really impressed with Trey'Dez to come in the middle of the year and not know any terminology, any ball screen coverage, side out of bounds under, and go down all the list of things that he's been learning in short order. I think it's a lot on his plate, and has a heavy academic workload this semester. So I think it, in collaboration with Coach Kelly, it's just the best thing for him right now to put his attention there and lock in on the academic side.
Okay. So is he locking in on just the academic side, or is it to focus on football? Maybe a little bit of both. So let me be very clear about this. I am hoping we see the day in short order that Trey'Dez Green is exclusively focusing on football. Now, I'll give you a little bit of disclosure here. So for those that are everydayers, you probably heard me say this, and thank you for being an everydayer. Had a chance to talk to Trey'Dez last spring, right about a year ago. Of course, he had signed with LSU for football, and it was the spring before he was showing up on campus. And I visited with Trey'Dez, and he told me basketball was his first love. And I don't think that's like breaking news. I don't think that should be surprising to anybody. This kid who loves basketball and didn't start playing football until his junior year of high school. He showed up at a camp, balled out. They're like, why aren't you playing football? Obviously, Zachary's a great football program in the state. But he was awesome, rose up, shot up all the recruiting charts, becomes a 5-star, signs with LSU, and as a freshman, made an impact. I mean, literally game 1 against USC, they drew up a play for Trey'Dez Green, which was open, just that Nussmeier got hit when he threw the ball. And I don't know, otherwise might have scored. But anyway, point is, Trey'Dez loves basketball. And that's great. And if he can do both, that's great. Really, that's great. If he can manage both. It's very rare that we see a player play both basketball and football at the college level. We've seen some great ones. Julius Peppers was an awesome basketball player in North Carolina. also is a great football player. We know guys like Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham. But what all those guys have in common is something that Trey'Dez Green shares as well. You see, when you're a 6'7" forward in basketball, you're just a guy. When you're a 6'7" tight end with that athletic ability and you're flexing out as a slot receiver and you got a 5'11", 6-foot nickelback, slot corner, or linebacker guarding you, that's a problem for other teams. Which is why I'll often say about Trey'Dez that his ceiling in football is exponentially higher than basketball. Like Trey'Dez Green at 6'7", 240 pounds is a gifted enough athlete to play college basketball, to play major. He showed it. He played in 6 games. I mean, he belongs. He can play, and he can give you meaningful minutes. But a guy that's going to grind to give you minutes off the bench, or a guy that has a legit high-level NFL future, the answer is pretty easy there. Now, I'm not going to make that decision for him. Only Trey'Dez can do ultimately what he wants. But it is worth reminding you that Trey'Dez Green is a scholarship athlete for football. He's on a football scholarship. Basketball is something he can do as a luxury if Brian Kelly allows it. And so far they have. They've allowed him to do the thing that he wants to do, which is play both. And if he does continue to play both and it's not a detriment to football, then great. But at this moment, with Trey'Dez Green stepping away from basketball, I think 2 things. Number one, Matt McMahon kind of talked about the academic load. And I believe that's part of it, but it is naive to think that it has nothing to do with the state that basketball is in and his ability in football. Meaning, if the LSU basketball team were fighting for an NCAA tournament berth and Trey'Dez Green was giving LSU 12 to 15 minutes a night off the bench, he's not leaving to focus on academics. Okay. But this is a team that has won 2 conference games, that it plays South Carolina on Tuesday. Got a great chance of winning that one. But after that, they're going to lose their next 5, and they'll be bounced in the first round of the tournament. They're not going anywhere. So is it really worth Trey'Dez Green continuing to play basketball for the next month and missing the first week of spring practice to give you a handful of minutes off the bench of the worst or second worst team in the SEC? Probably not. Not when his ceiling in football is so much higher. That's one. 2 is Trey'Dez Green needs spring football. Now, if he's stuck with basketball through the SEC tournament, the way the calendar works is Trey'Dez would end up missing the first week of spring. And that's not devastating. He could be there for the rest of spring. But he is a guy that needs every single rep he can get. You see, my long-held feeling about spring football is that my old buddy Mike Detillier used to say practice is for the unskilled. I've told this story before. I had Moeldy Moore on my show years ago, my radio show. And if you're not familiar, Moeldy Moore is a guy who prepped at Bel Air and Baton Rouge, went to Tulane, and became an all-time, greatest player in the history of Tulane. He was one of only a couple of players in the history of college athletics to rush for 4,000 yards and have 1,000 yards receiving. It's something crazy like that. All-time great player. And I asked Moeldy about spring, and he kind of just joked. He was like, I never practiced in spring. The coaches just wouldn't even let me dress. He would just sit on the bleachers. And that's because they know what you are. Garrett Nussmeier doesn't need spring. Whit Weeks doesn't need spring. Whit Weeks coming off an injury. All I need Whit Weeks to do is be healthy when LSU plays Clemson. That's it. He don't need spring football. You know who needs spring football? Your offensive line. You got 4 new starters on the offensive line. Your offensive line needs spring. Weston Davis, Tyree Adams, potentially first-year starters at tackle. They need every rep they can get. You know who needs spring football? DJ Pickett. DJ Pickett's a freshman early enrollee who has a legitimate chance of playing significant snaps for you defensively. He needs every single rep he can get to sharpen his skills against SEC caliber receivers. So by the time fall camp rolls around and game 1 rolls around, he's been here almost a year. It feels like it's old hat already. You know who needs spring football? Trey'Dez Green needs spring football. A guy who played 2 years of high school, just finished his first year of college football, is still learning route concepts, blocking. Oh, by the way, you've got a new tight ends coach, Alex Atkins, coming in, who's going to have new expectations. I need Trey'Dez Green. You're losing the greatest pass-catching tight end in the history of the program. You're bringing in Bauer Sharp, Donovan Green, 2 transfers. Trey'Dez has a different skill set from those 2 guys. I need Trey'Dez getting every single rep imaginable in spring. The bowl practices, massive for Trey'Dez Green. Spring football, massive for a guy that is continuing to develop in the position in the game. So if you ask me, do I want Trey'Dez Green running the floor for 6 minutes a night for a team that's the worst or second to worst team in the SEC that has no shot at the postseason, or taking the next month to get his body right to be ready to maximize spring football? You know my answer. Get your academics right, get your body right, get ready to roll for spring, because the LSU football team needs Trey'Dez Green to maximize spring football. LSU basketball doesn't need Trey'Dez Green to sit on the bench and give him a handful of minutes a night for a bad basketball team. So in every way possible, this is the right decision for Trey'Dez to step away from basketball. Does he ever go back to basketball? I don't know. My guess is if Trey'Dez Green goes and has the sophomore season I think he's capable of, if he goes and catches 45 balls for 500 yards and 8 touchdowns, I think someone pulls him aside and says, hey, look, you spend this offseason getting your body right and everything right to do that again, and you're a multimillionaire many times over come April next year. So yes, Trey'Dez Green needs spring, and LSU needs Trey'Dez Green to be present in spring football. It's absolutely the right decision for him to step away from basketball at this point. We'll see if he ever finds his way back. Speaking of basketball, LSU is on the floor against South Carolina on Tuesday. I'll give you a thumbnail preview of that next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any more money back. Now, taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So the LSU basketball team is back at it on Tuesday. They are at the Maravich Center, and quite frankly, this is the most winnable game of the entire season. South Carolina is winless in conference play. The Gamecocks are 10-15 overall. They're 0-12 in the SEC. LSU at home against South Carolina. The line is posted. Tigers a 2.5-point favorite. That is certainly indicative of the challenges that this LSU team faces. According to ESPN stats, LSU with a 70% chance of winning this basketball game. Pretty easy when you think about what this game is going to be. It's an 8 o'clock Central Time tip, and you need Cam Carter to be your best player because that really is and has consistently been the only offense that you have. Carter scored 29 points in LSU's win over Oklahoma, including that dramatic sequence at the end where LSU was down 5. Carter got the 3, was fouled, made the free throw, 4-point play. LSU steals the ball, gets it to Carter, hoop in the horn, 3-point play. Just like that, Cam Carter goes on a 7-0 run himself to give LSU the lead and ultimately the win. LSU's not a good offensive team. They've got to have Cam Carter score. He's averaging 17 points per game. Jordan Sears is averaging 10.9 over the last 10 games, but it all is about Cam Carter. Tigers were pretty good from behind the arc against Oklahoma. They made just under 8. They're averaging 8 threes a game. South Carolina averaging just under 70 points per game. They have struggled offensively. Colin Murray-Boyles is the one player you got to watch. He's averaging 15 points per game. Jamari Thomas averaging 8 per game over the last 10. So Colin Murray-Boyles is the name to know for South Carolina. That's the guy that LSU is going to have to try to find a way to stop. He's a sophomore forward, 6'7", 245, built a lot actually like Trey'Dez Green, who we spent the whole first segment here talking about. But for LSU, the big question is going to be about Corey Chest. Is he available in this game after missing the game against Oklahoma? LSU needs him in the front court. So we'll see if he's able to go. He's been LSU's best guy in the front court, no doubt. If not, Robert Miller, you'd anticipate would get more minutes. But this is an LSU team that is 2-10 in the league. The only team worse in the conference is South Carolina at 0-12. So it's a pillow fight in the SEC. It's a battle of the 2 worst teams in the conference. It's an opportunity for LSU to go get a win. And it's worth mentioning, again, that this is your last opportunity to win. Realistically, let's just be very frank. After this game against South Carolina, you host number 2 Florida. Then you host number 6 Tennessee. You're at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. Then you're home against number 7 Texas A&M. So after you play South Carolina, 3 of your final 5 are at home against top 10 teams in America, number 2, 6, and 7. Your other 2 games are on the road against ranked opponents, at Mississippi State, number 21, and at number 17, Kentucky. You are not winning again. So you got a chance to get back-to-back conference wins. You got to protect your home floor here against South Carolina. And look, we could play the what-if game. What if you had actually shown up and beaten Vanderbilt, Missouri to start conference play? Then, you're at 4. And a win over South Carolina could get you to 5. And, of course, you gagged away a game against Ole Miss, which would have been 6. And you could start to play that what-if game. And then you're hovering somewhere around the bubble. I'm not saying you're anywhere close to being in, but you're hovering around the bubble. That's just not how it played out. You're a 2-win team in conference. This is your last chance to win. Here's hoping the Tigers can go out to the Maravich Center on Tuesday night and get it. Before LSU plays at the Maravich Center on Tuesday night, the baseball team will be at the box on Tuesday afternoon for matinee against Southern. I'll give you a thumbnail preview of that as we wrap up Locked on LSU, your team every day. It's a busy week for LSU baseball. So the Tigers get their 3-game series sweep over the weekend against Purdue Fort Wayne. And now they turn around and have back-to-back midweek games. So LSU will play Southern on Tuesday at 2 p.m. at the box. And then Wednesday, they're on the road at Nichols for a night game down in Thibodaux. So let's talk about the Southern game and what we can expect at this point. As of right now, Jay Johnson hasn't named a starting pitcher. And I think this is going to be the most interesting decision for the Tigers. Now, there were 3 arms that did not go this weekend, that did not see the mound, that we're anticipating will be key contributors. Gavin Guidry, Connor Ware, and Zach Cohen. Those 3 did not pitch this weekend. Now, Guidry, we know. Guidry closed out the national championship 2 years ago and has been a really good back of the bullpen guy. He's on the watch list for stopper of the year. He is a guy that has made his living as a collegiate pitcher in the back of the bullpen. But you have a staff loaded with guys capable of filling that role. Guys like Jacob Myers, who throws 98, struck out 106 in 70 innings pitched last year at Nichols. Guys like William Schmidt, who could be a ninth inning guy for you or could extend and pitch 3 innings or 2 innings for you at the end of a game. We've just seen so many electric arms over this opening weekend that it's hard to know exactly where guys are going to fill in. But Gavin Guidry is a guy that for as long as he's been on campus, we've talked about the possibility of him being a starting pitcher. And last year, when LSU was sort of desperate for guys capable of doing that, that's one of the things we mentioned. Guidry could very well get an opportunity to start against either Southern or Nichols one of the next 2 days. And I think the same is true for Connor Ware. Now, if it is Connor Ware, I want to make sure I plant this seed so you're well aware of who he is. So Connor Ware is a lefty from JUCO. He wears number 55, and he is no joke. He is 6'4", 221 pounds from Madison, Mississippi, went to Pearl River Community College for the first 2 years before transferring to LSU. He had 7 appearances in 2024 with a couple of saves, a 1.80 ERA, 21 strikeouts in 15 innings pitched. As a freshman, started 3 times in 6 appearances, had was 3-0, a 1.59 ERA with 28 strikeouts over 17 innings pitched. So you're talking about a guy who has legit strikeout stuff, who throws mid-upper 90s from the left side. So Connor Ware is a guy that perfect game this year coming into the season, ranked number 60 on the top 100 juniors in college baseball. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who is a scout, who had a chance to watch LSU a lot here in fall and in the preseason, and said Connor Ware in the fall and the preseason was LSU's best pitcher. No qualifiers. Not best newcomer, not best guy out of the bullpen, not best after the starters. Said unequivocally, no qualifiers. Connor Ware was LSU's best pitcher in fall and so far in preseason. That's a mouthful. And ultimately, it would lead you to believe that if any of the guys starting right now, Cade Anderson, Anthony Ianson, Chase Shores, if any of them struggles, wobbles, falters, Connor Ware would be the guy in line maybe to step into that weekend rotation. I'm not saying that's definitive, but it's something worth keeping an eye on. So I know I'm hyping this guy a little right now, but it's worth it because 6'4", 220 pounds, throwing mid-upper 90s from the left side, you don't see it often. And if he commands it, is good, that could be a guy that continues to see an increased role. My guess is the reason Ware and Guidry and Cohen didn't pitch this weekend was because Jay knew he had 18 innings on Tuesday, Wednesday he had to fill before you get guys ready for another weekend series coming up. I mean, this is 5 games in 6 days for LSU. You play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you get Monday off, you play Tuesday, Wednesday. That's a lot of innings you got to eat up over 5 games in 6 days. So here he has guys that he knows can extend. Zach Cohen, who I just mentioned also, was the Friday night guy at Wofford. So he's a Friday night guy from a regional team a year ago, played incidentally in the Chapel Hill regional where LSU was, and is now a guy who's maybe your midweek guy. So again, we're going to see those 3 guys over the next 2 days, undeniably. Who starts, who extends, that's worth seeing. But one of the next 2 games, I'm assuming we're going to see Connor Ware start, either against Southern or against Nichols, and I am very much excited for that show. A couple of other things worth keeping an eye on. What do you do with Ashton Larson? Larson only started Sunday as a DH. Do you give him a shot in right field? Maybe that's a guy who's earned an opportunity at more playing time. Also fascinated to see what you do behind the plate. Remember, you divvied up the duties behind the plate primarily with Hernandez and Aaron Beatty. So with back-to-back games on Tuesday, Wednesday, my guess is you're not going to have one guy catch all those games. And plus, you're trying to get all these guys innings. So does maybe Aaron Beatty start one and Priester start another? Blaze Priester played in a backup role over the weekend, only had one at-bat. He struck out. Maybe a really good opportunity one of the next 2 days to get Priester in there as the starting catcher, and maybe you DH Hernandez if that's the route you want to go. Depending if you want to go lefty righty, you could DH Hernandez as a righty or Josh Pearson as a lefty if you keep Jake Brown in right field. Just something to keep an eye on. Right field would be the other question. Does Jake Brown start in right field? Do you give Ashton Larson a start in right field? Does Josh Pearson start in right field? Those are the guys, as we start to narrow it down, we're looking at saying, okay, the two spots that are really up for grab are catcher, right field, and you got three guys vying for each spot. How do you consistently see that rotation? How does Jay manage it? That's going to be fascinating to see. So LSU against Southern, 2:00 matinee on Tuesday out at the box, and then LSU will play Wednesday night at Nichols. Of course, we'll be back here to recap the Tuesday afternoon game against Southern on Locked On LSU. Okay, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode. Y'all do me a favor. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And let a friend know that if you love the Tigers, if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.